Hello and welcome to how AV standards help to grow the business and market ecosystem. Standards, well, perhaps like this chap, you think that they're tedious and dull, not relevant to your projects, complicated or just full of technical mumbo jumbo. Well, for me, standards are a guiding light, islands of certainty in often difficult projects, something you can grab a hold of and rely on. Standards are produced by our peers, they're peer reviewed, and they contain our industry best practice, the best approaches and ways that we as an industry have come up with to tackle certain problems, be they technical or be they process. Standards are also a multi-purpose tool for end users, for contract managers, for system integrators, for designers and consultants. Standards also provide guidance. They give you confidence, gravitas and professionalism, compliance. Ultimately, if you abide by the standards, your project isn't going to go far wrong. CTS and Apex are the standard for professionals working in the industry, a standard that allows us to ensure that projects are executed to a satisfactory level. After all, if the project team does not come up to standard, why would you hire them? So what are the benefits to a system integrator of using AV standards? Standards are actually really good for system integrators. They give relief from price-only competition to compete on demonstrable value. Clarity about when a project is complete. Clarity about what is and what is not additional scope. Clear design responsibility and clear installation responsibility. This gives you the ability to demonstrate that a project is complete and that payments are now justified. And further, this clarity leads to good client relationships and less friction in the project. And for the end user, the benefits of standards. Standards give you the confidence and clarity that a project is complete and that payments can be made. You're in no doubt. You know that you've got everything that you're meant to have, a clear definition of the outcome. And for consultants and designers, they add the necessary weight to technical arguments when trade-offs must be made. You might, if you squint, just at the back of the room here, be able to make out a screen. This is a common problem. A long skinny room with a display at one end, clearly not a good design solution. Standards provide you with the power to show why this is wrong and to work with the rest of the design team to make changes to the project to mitigate the problem. In the case here, working with the interior design team, the orientation of the room was switched around and placed the screens on the long wall here, thus changing the orientation of the audience and reducing the viewing distance, ending up with a much better AV experience than would otherwise be had in a room like this. It's thought, although perhaps incorrectly, that standards somehow limit your design freedom. Well, this isn't really the case. Here's a little analogy, if you wish. So our design solution is for a river crossing, and our standard might simply require that you don't get your feet wet. This chap here, this design, is a pole vault mechanism, and it seems to work. Maybe with a little bit more investment, we could go with a tightrope solution, although perhaps mainly for the intrepid. Something safer, and perhaps more longer lasting, we could invest in a bridge type solution. Or if we're really going for the gold plated high end, we can use our executive jet to cross the river. All of these comply with the standard requirement of not getting your feet wet. All of these designs provide the solution for crossing the river. But let's make an AV example. So now we're looking to design a voice lift solution, and our standard may simply require that everybody in the room can be heard and everybody in the room can hear. So we could try with our all-in-one integrated solution, the karaoke microphone. Portable and compact, it can be passed around the room and used by each individual as they wish to speak, allowing their voice to be heard by others. We could go with a slightly better quality solution, and we could use a delegate conference system where everybody seated in front of a microphone would be heard and they could hear the other conferees in the room. Or we could go for another type of solution where we use ceiling microphones and everybody within the room or sat at the table could be heard, their voices picked up and reproduced by the system. Or we could go for a more sophisticated solution using ambient acoustic enhancement, where the voices of the people within the room are regenerated within the room so that you can stand anywhere and be heard and listen anywhere and hear somebody speaking. All of these four solutions are all very different, but they all meet the standard and they provide the solution. So standards are not limiting. They don't limit your design options at all. Well, standards are also good for distributors and manufacturers. The use of AV standards leads to greater client satisfaction, fewer headaches, much less hand-holding, and reduced reputational damage, freeing the manufacturer and the distributor up to do what they do best and not worrying about how their products are actually implemented into projects. So, we're looking for success, but what is project success? Success seems to mean different things to different people. But project success is really about how the end user feels about the system. It's not the quantity of the flat panel displays or the latest gadgets we've used. We don't need a super hologram solution for our project to be a success. If the system works well for the end user and does what they need, we have succeeded. This doesn't always mean that the client understands their requirements, and this of course is our true value as industry professionals, to provide advice and guide our clients to a good outcome. Now, whilst as a client you expect good value and ROI, it's equally reasonable for the providers, our consultants, system integrators, distributors, manufacturers, to expect a profit. So this might be the simplest definition of project success, based on a financial outcome. An equally important sign of success is client retention and referrals. As well as a source of future income, this is also a strong indication of a job well done. To retain a client, they need to be a satisfied client. And this is where standards and expectation managements come in. Following the standards, manage expectations from the outset so that we can deliver client satisfaction, meet expectations, meet requirements, deliver a great user experience, with the ensuing value to our AV system economy that comes from repeat business and success. So why don't installations always meet expectations? Well, perhaps it's that the expectations and the requirements are not fully understood. The project definition is incorrect, perhaps, or missing. The steps, define, integrate, and verify, have not been followed. Now, there is something very difficult about the place in our industry the system integrator finds themselves. It may seem fundamental, but in order to determine the devices and equipment needed for a project, a design is required. The more design work that is done, the less the risk of cost overrun or the client being unsatisfied with the outcome. But without a purchase order, how much design should the system integrator actually do? Of course, to get a PO, you need a price, and a large part of that price is the equipment. You can't get one without knowing the other. Often, just a loose design is created. and then defined as a BOQ. The project now has a significant risk, as it's not possible to ascertain if the BOQ meets the client's requirements, simply because there's no design. To remove this risk, a system integrator will often sell a BOQ, a list of equipment, which is not a solution to meet the client's requirements. And this is where the misalignment of requirements and project begins. The risk has now been transferred to the unwitting client. The client believes he has purchased a solution to meet his requirements, and that the BOQ represents this. During the install, somehow the system must now be made to fit the BOQ. The real risk here is, though, that the client will be dissatisfied. But what can the integrator do? Fully develop the design and hope that the purchase order comes through and is not given to his competition? We know we must define the system, but how? Free design is not the solution. How much free work can you do? And with all the best intentions, how good is free anyway? So we need to solve the integrator's dilemma. Design as a separate service is best practice to arrive at solutions that meet the client's requirements. So as an end user, what do you want? Well, value for money, happy users, low maintenance, no surprises, and really to get what you wanted in the first place, what you set out to achieve. Well, value for money is hard to determine. There is always someone who will do it cheaper. This will never change. But you don't know that cheaper is the same or that cheaper is sufficient unless it's defined, and defined in a standard, comparable way. The equipment may be the same brand, the same model, but this is not what determines the outcome of a project. How do you know for sure what you're being offered meets your requirements before it's too late? Not to mention, how does the supplier know that what they offer meets the requirements? The truth is that without definition, nobody knows, and that is what's worrying. AV standards will not get you the cheapest price. The cheapest price almost certainly won't meet all your requirements. What you do get is the right price for what is required in a clearly defined way. Once defined, the project can be priced accurately. Once defined, the project can be verified. Either design build or design build specifications can be created for a project. These are created by an AV designer or a consultant, and in some instances by professional end users. By, in the first instance, creating standards compliant project documentation and specifying that AV standards are used throughout the project, you will get what you wanted. It sounds obvious, but understanding what you need is the first step. A designer or a consultant can work with a client to determine these needs. This is not an equipment list, this is about function. It's about performance and quality. Secondly, this should be documented, as this is the foundation upon which the project will be built. If it's not in the specification, nobody should assume that it will somehow happen all by itself. If it's not in the specification, the specification represents what is expected by the client and what is expected to be done by the project team. It captures this information. If the specification does not provide a full solution to the client's needs, then the project will not be a success. The client will be dissatisfied, and they may have reason not to pay. Now, we've all experienced bad video conference calls. If the quality of the video conference is not specified, then who's to say what's good enough? But should the client be happy with this? Well, probably not. Technical standards provide an ideal way of leveling the playing field so that the client and the integrator both get what they want, allowing us to call the project a success. So we can deliver video conferencing where we can see people's facial expressions, see when they smile, see their eyes, and so forth. And the standard we would use in this particular instance is the lighting performance for small to medium-sized video conferencing rooms. And we would specify this standard to achieve that outcome. Define, integrate, verify. These are the 3 clear steps to project success. Understand the requirements allows us to define a system to meet those requirements. Integrate the system, and then verify the system meets the definition. Verification makes it clear to the client and the system integrator that the work is complete, correct, and that payments can be made. Expectations are managed and satisfaction attained. So who does what? In our AV industry, our well-oiled machine, requirements go in and then systems come out. In our AV industry, we have professional users deliver experiences to others using AV technology. We have consultants, designers, who advise on behalf of clients and create designs and specifications. System integrators, who procure equipment, install, test, and commission systems. Distributors, supplying products, providing product training. And manufacturers, who develop and produce the products. These are the elements of the AV industry, and each has a role to play. As project success is not possible without definition, where should this definition come from? Manufacturers can and do offer design related to their specific products. This is of great value to AV system designers, but is not in itself the definition or design we need for a project, as it is single source focused and excludes everything not relevant to the particular brand. Distributors also provide design. Again, this is limited to specific product ranges and cannot encompass the needs and requirements for an entire project. Distributor design is a valuable aid to AV designers who must understand a broad spectrum of solutions, however. System integrators offer design, but as we've seen, this comes with caveats. System integrators may also offer design as a service and not bundled with a fixed price proposal. There's a way around these caveats. The system integrator's dilemma comes into play where the integrator is expected to provide a competitive fixed price proposal for everything to meet the client requirements, but without being paid for a design to determine the cost of the system and no guarantee of recouping those design costs needed to determine what meets the client requirements. To a large extent, this negates the value of design provided as a part of design-build projects. Because it's not possible to create ahead of the design a BOQ that represents the client requirements. And this creates risk in the project. And risk leads to dissatisfaction. Designers and consultants, well, charge a fee and are professionally liable for their designs. The resulting specification can be costed by multiple system integrators without additional design work. Both the client and the system integrator are protected. Professional users, often in broadcast or live events, are intimately familiar with their needs and requirements, and often capable of developing project specifications and managing design and build projects. As is apparent, the define step is best undertaken by the AV designer or professional user. The integrate step is the sole domain of the system integrator, whilst verification is undertaken by both designers and installers, with both parties liable for their respective works. At each of the steps, AV standards define the process. At the define stage, the 2M guide for AV design and coordination process is applicable. At the integrate stage, we have the individual technology standards. For example, those relating to image size or display contrast, or in the example just earlier, where we were looking at video conference lighting. At the verify stage, the 10M audiovisual system performance verification standard is applied. So what is design? Well, firstly, design is not a BOQ. The BOQ is one of several outcomes of a design, the accuracy of which, and hence risk associated with the BOQ, is determined by the level of detail within that design. All of these preceding steps determine this outcome. So we start with the analysis, the requirements and needs of the client and end users, the location, the site constraints, and so forth. We translate this into functionality, what the system must do, its capabilities. And then we develop the performance requirements, how well the system must work, how loud, how bright, how long should it last, 3 years, 5 years. Performance essentially equates to quality. In some instances, a high quality system may be required or desired, and in some instances, a lower quality system may well be more appropriate. Coordination. Everywhere where the system touches the real world or the work of others, the spaces to accommodate the system, the acoustic requirements, and the compromises imposed by other project requirements and the mitigating design features needed to accommodate them. Drawings are the diagrammatic representation of the project, whilst the written specification is the text definition of the project, capturing the system as designed to meet the client requirements. And then finally, the BOQ, which is derived from the design specifications, with its equipment selected to meet the performance and functionality as determined necessary to meet those original client requirements. Design bid build or design build. So, what's the difference? Well, for both design build and consultant-led design bid build projects, the process is the same. Ultimately, we need to do the same things to ensure a successful project outcome. Summarized as define, integrate, and verify, our 3 steps, we gather the requirements, we translate them into functionality and performance, we develop the design specification from this, we go and install the system, and we verify that the system meets those original requirements. We close the circle, and if we close the circle, we get a successful project. So these are our 3 steps: define, integrate, and verify, and each one of these steps is supported by the AV standards. So, an important question: will you pay more to use AV standards? Now, simplistically, it may seem that complying with standards costs more money. This, however, is not the case. And even better, the standards give you the power to choose how much you spend. You're now in control of the relationship between cost and specification. You can choose to pay less by reducing specification, or increase the cost and specification to meet new needs, or pay the same as you might have otherwise, but with the certainty that the specification is met. You can compare apples to apples between providers. Standards give you the certainty that your project requirements are met by the project specification and are in turn met by the finished system. Our project requirements, our specification, and our system. It brings us clarity that they equate. Perhaps the question is, can you afford not to have a standards compliant system? By using AV standards, the risk of wasting money on systems that don't meet requirements, or on systems with features that are over and above what is actually needed, is removed. If you use AV standards, you're in control of the outcome. Otherwise, the outcome controls you. So what if lower cost is the primary concern? Then a simpler standards compliance system is going to be better value than, for the same price, a more complex system which does not perform adequately. We can now adjust requirements in a controlled way, and consequently we can adjust budget using our nice slider here perhaps. We can adjust the requirements to meet the budget goals. Implementing AV standards will improve your return on investment, ensuring reliability, reducing surprises and additional costs, ensuring systems get used, and giving you a verified investment. Standards drive good user experiences as well. Good user experience delivers good ROI because the systems get used. An important factor is getting the fundamentals right. Now, does a 6,000 lumen projector mean that we will have a good picture? Does a brand X sound system mean that we will have excellent intelligible sound? Of course they don't. But we often fall into this trap of trying to specify quality or function by referencing products or product specifications. It's the system specification that counts. That determines the user experience. Devices, equipment, and products should be chosen to meet the functional and performance requirements of the client, not the other way around. How could we know if a 6,000 lumen projector is going to have a good picture? We can't. But we can specify a good picture using such values as its image contrast and its image size. From this we can then develop a system design to provide that definition, to meet the definition, and that will then determine the products. Now let's have a look at how to implement standards in project documentation. For design-build projects, specify all the applicable standards in the employer's requirements document. Then include all functional and performance criteria required to enable those standards. So what do I mean by that? So for example, if we choose to use the projected image contrast ratio standard, PISCA, we would accompany this with the required image contrast ratio. So we include the standard, say please use this standard, and then we say this is the contrast ratio we would like to go with that. We might choose a value of say 18:1 for example. We could choose 16:1, we could choose 20:1. It depends on the quality of the system that we've agreed with our client. Now for consultant design projects, specify AVIXA standards as part of the AV consultant's scope, meaning the consultant must also follow those standards. The project RFP tender specification must also include the AVIXA standards, so the consultant must include the requirement within the project's tender documents. The AV consultant must also include all functional and performance criteria required to enable the standards. So when they produce the tender specification documents, that would, to use our previous example, include the desired contrast value of 18:1. So two simple steps really. Require the standard, and here's a piece of text of how you might require the standard in a contract document. And then secondly, prime the standard. Prime the standard by giving the performance or the functional value that you want, the outcome you're going to expect. In this case, it's 15:1 contrast ratio, but it could be a higher value because we'd like a better quality system, such as our 18:1 we were talking about a moment ago. The client's documentation to either a design build system integrator or an AV designer consultant must require the use of the AV standards. In the case of a design and build contract document, this is called the employer's requirements. This should include the requirement for the design and execution to comply with the AV standards. It must also include all of the functionality and the performance for the system. In the case of a consultant design project, the client contract document is called the consultation agreement, and this requires to have the standards incorporated in that so that the consultant follows those standards. And it must also require compliance to the standards within the contract the project specification that the consultant produces. So here's a simple step-by-step summary of all of this. So we have our client contracts a designer to produce a standards compliant design. In the next step, the designer's specification requires standards compliance from the system integrator. The client then contracts the system integrator using the designer's specification. The system integrator delivers a standards compliant installation, and now the client is now confident to sign off the project. We're going to get this nice outcome from this, which is that the project requirements are equal to the project specification, are equal to the finished system, and that all of this is verifiable. It can be checked, we can trust it. So to conclude, don't purchase a list of equipment. Contract to buy performance and functionality. AV standards and the AV process will get you this, and otherwise you might just only get equipment. If you have questions or wish to discuss further, please join us in the Q&A panel session, which will be in about 30 minutes. I hope to see you there and discuss anything you might want to bring up. If you wish to download the AV standards, you can do that here at the AVIXA website. Thank you very, very much.